My first visit to Prescott was in August of 1991. I came to collect ghost stories and was told to visit the Hotel Vendome. At the hotel, I met Ken Henderson. He worked at the Vendome back then and was willing to share what he knew about the resident ghost.
Well, the story goes back to 1924, and there was a permanent guest in the hotel here at that time, and she lived in room 16. 16 is on the second floor of the hotel, right in the front, overlooks the upstairs veranda. And she died in 1924 in that room, and her name is Abigail. The information that we have on her, we have found out through seances, through Ghostbuster groups, people with Ouija boards that come and stay in the room. According to the story, she died in 1924, and the cause of her death was, sometimes she says it was, she died of consumption, and other times she said that she committed suicide. Now, the consumption story fits in very well with Prescott in the 1920s, because there were a lot of sanitariums here for lung ailments. Now, perhaps she committed suicide due to the consumption, we do not know. And she has been asked many times why she is still here, and the answer that she gives is that she was betrayed. She will never say any more. At first, she gave me a hard time, and she does many of the new employees. We've had several maids at one time that have quit because they would go to clean room 16, and they would go to open the door, and they would get pushed when they would go in the door, and they refused to clean that room. She is very prone to play tricks on new employees. And after the employees have been here for a while, she sort of settles back and she decides it's no use anymore to play these tricks on them. They're never bad things at all. It's just, they're pranks that she plays. I only know of one case where she did something bad, and the reason for it is because these people had aggravated her. These three women from California came to the hotel and stayed in room 16, which is the famous room that Abby died in. They had requested that particular room. They had heard about Abby. And during the night, they decided that they wanted to see if they could have her do something in the room. Well, they had brought a candle, and they lit the candle. And during the night, they wanted her to blow out the candle. She would not blow out the candle. She kept opening the transom over the door, opening and closing the transom. There's a glass transom over every door. They kept insisting that she blow out the candle, and one of the women said, "I don't believe that you're really here at all." With that, the women claimed that there was a rush of wind through the room, a noise like a train going through. The candle was blown out. The women got panicky. This was about 1 o'clock in the morning, and the women came tearing down the stairs, two of them in their night clothes with clothes over their arm and their suitcase. The other woman checked out, and she wouldn't say what had happened. It wasn't until about 2 years later, when two of the women returned, that we found out what had really happened. Now, nobody else heard this noise that they said was so tremendous. They thought they had waken up the whole neighborhood. But that is the only case that I know where she really did something that wasn't very nice. The rest of her pranks are sort of funny, really. One of her favorite tricks is to knock during the night, and there'll be a guest residing in the room. She Suddenly they will hear a knocking, and they'll think it's somebody at the door. And they go to the door, and there's nobody there. They go back to bed, and a few minutes later the knocking starts again, and the knocking is coming from the bathroom door. An interesting story of Abby, and this was about 5 years ago. We had an employee here that Abby didn't like, a female employee. And she was constantly playing tricks on her. And this was a night in the middle of winter, and all of our guests were on the first floor of the hotel. And Ginny, this girl, was sitting in the lobby in the chair that I'm sitting in right now, and she was reading. It was late at night, and suddenly she heard footsteps upstairs. So she thought somebody had gotten in upstairs, so she went upstairs and nobody there. She came back downstairs, and a few minutes later she heard the footsteps again. So she got the pass key. She was a brave girl. She got the pass key and went into each and every room, checked the closets, checked behind shower curtains. Nobody there at all. She came downstairs, and when her relief came at midnight, she told him about it. About 2 o'clock in the morning, he heard footsteps upstairs. So he got the pass key, and he went through the routine of going through all the rooms, nothing there. When he got to room 16, which is right above where I'm sitting now, there was a great big wet spot on the floor. And this happens occasionally in that room. It wasn't raining, our roof doesn't leak, but suddenly this wet spot appears in the room. And it has, the wet spot has no smell whatsoever. Another interesting story about Abby is she has told several times at seances and with the Ghostbuster groups that she had a cat. And the cat's name was Noble. If she tells you what the cat's name is and you ask her questions about the cat and you refer to it as the cat, she will not answer you. You have to call the cat by name. And this cat died here in the hotel. And the cat was killed by a little boy who lived in the hotel at that time. Now, the story goes that there was a man who used to come in here quite often. He would come in here one night a week, always the nights when I was on duty. He would come to the bar, and he was a man, elderly man, around 75. And he would always have one beer, and he would always put down every time a $20 bill. And we got talking, and he told me that years ago he lived here in the hotel. Well, when I heard the story about the little boy who killed Noble, I thought, I wonder if this is the man. Oh, by the way, Abby also mentioned that the person, the little boy that killed Noble, is in Prescott and comes into the hotel. So I thought the next time he comes in, I'm going to ask him. That man has never shown up since, and I have never seen him on the streets. So I don't know whether he was the little boy who killed Abby. Perhaps he was a ghost too, I don't know. We had a Ghostbuster group here. This was quite interesting, about 4 years ago. And it was during the summertime, and they were holding a seance in room 16. And they were asking her about Noble, the cat. And they asked her where she buried the cat. And she told them on the side of the hotel. So they left the seance, and they went outside, and they went up and down both sides of the hotel. Nothing at all. Finally, they went towards the rear of the hotel. There's a wall there, and they claim that the temperature dropped about 15 degrees. They went back upstairs and continued the seance and asked Abby if the this is where Noble was buried, and she said yes by the wall. So we know where Noble was buried. His grave has not been disturbed, however. I know of a few cases. I know of people who have stayed here. They are guests that return all the time that claim that they have seen her in the halls. This one particular woman who comes here claims that she has a feeling during the night, and she gets up and looks down the hall, and she sees a woman who is dressed all in white, and there's a man there, a portly gentleman older than the woman, and she gets the feeling that this woman in white is afraid of this gentleman. Now, is this why Abby was betrayed? I don't know. It could have been this gentleman who's appearing. But she is the only one that I know that this has happened to, and it's happened 3 or 4 times. And the gentleman is not dressed as we dress today. It's dressed in the time of the 20s. There is a couple that come here from Apache Junction, and they come here quite often. They know about Abby. They always stay in room 16. And they have had a few experiences, but a couple of years ago they had a very strange one. The weekend, evidently it was his wife's birthday or their anniversary or something like that. And he had bought her a flower arrangement. She had placed the flower arrangement on one side of the dresser in room 16, and they left and went out for dinner. When they returned, the flowers had been moved to the other side of the dresser. They moved the flowers back to where she had originally put them, went to bed, and woke up in the morning, and the flowers had been moved. That same morning, she went out to do some shopping. You know how women are, they like to shop. He was sitting in the room, and he was reading. He was sitting in a chair reading. Now, room 16 has 2 windows. One window faces the front veranda. The other one is on the side of the room, and it's on the 2nd floor. There's no fire escape there, nothing at all. Suddenly, he saw a movement out of the corner of his eye, and he looked up at the window, the side window, not the one on the veranda, and there was a woman standing at the window. He says she was strangely dressed, she had reddish hair, she smiled, and she waved and disappeared. Well, he got up from the chair and ran out on the veranda and looked, and there was absolutely nothing there whatsoever. And these people come here quite often. So it's a very interesting story. Mark had not been working here at the hotel very long, and as I mentioned before, she is prone to play tricks on newer employees. He was working the graveyard shift, and at night we dimmed the lights in the lobby and in the hallways, and he was in the office and he was doing some auditing work, and suddenly he heard a noise in the lobby, and the noise was similar to, he thought somebody was in the lobby, and he came outside and he looked around, and there was nobody here. He looked at the little bar tables that we have in the lobby. We have a small bar here in the lobby, and we keep all of the ashtrays in the middle of the tables. All of the ashtrays had been moved to the edge of the table. He thought, uh-oh, Abby is down here. So he went back into the office and tried to continue his auditing work. And about 10 minutes later, he again heard this noise. And finally, it was ended with a crash. And he came out here to the lobby, and one of the ashtrays had fallen on the floor. And we've tried to ascertain whether was Abby down here in the lobby, or could she do that from room 16? One of her favorite tricks, and this was a trick that she used to play on me all the time, and at night you do a hall check and go upstairs and downstairs, down the halls, And there's a glass transom above every door. And I would go up, say at 8 o'clock at night, and do a hall check. There'd be no guests registered in room 16. The door would be locked and the room would be dark. Go back up about 10 o'clock and either the lights would be on or sometimes the television would be on. And you could tell through the glass transom, you see the reflection of the television on the ceiling. I'd get the pass key, go in the room, the television would be on, but never any sound. It was always just the picture. I'd go in, turn it off, and my usual comment to her was, "Let's knock it off for tonight, Abby." And I finally figured out why there was no sound. Because she died in 1924. They didn't have talking pictures in 1924. So she's probably waiting to see the subtitles come on and find out what they're really talking about. We had an instance, and this was a room downstairs on the first floor, and we had this elderly couple that were staying here. Now, they had a cat at home. We do not allow pets in the hotel. And they were asleep this one particular night, and suddenly the woman felt something jump up on the bed, walk across the bed, and cuddle next to her legs. She turned on the light, and there was nothing there. And we are wondering whether cats have ghosts, whether this was Noble who had come back, decided maybe Noble had found somebody who was affectionate to cats, thought he'd give them a special treat. Well, there is a story as far as when this house was built. Now, this is a story that I have heard for some time, that when the man who built the hotel here in 1917, when he bought the property, there was a house on this property. And the story goes, I'm not sure, I have not been able to check into it, that there was a widow, a young widow, who was living in the house. And when the man bought the property and had the hotel built, that he had promised this woman that she would always have a place to live. And I've often wondered if that possibly could have been Abby, our ghost, because she was a permanent guest here in the hotel. I have never been able to check the property records and so forth. Going back to 1917 would be quite a project to do. But it would be interesting to find out if the woman's name that he bought the property from was Abigail. We did have a gentleman here about a year and a half ago. It's quite interesting. We had walk-in guests. These are guests that were not holding reservations. And they just came to the desk and they asked if we had rooms for the night. And there were two couples. There was a younger man and a woman and an older man and a woman. And they checked into the hotel, went out for dinner, and came back. The gentleman, the younger gentleman, came to our little bar in the lobby and decided to have a glass of wine. There was another guest at the bar, and two gentlemen got talking, and this one man says, "Has Ken told you about the ghost?" Well, the look of amazement appeared on this man's face, and he said, "You have a presence here?" And I said, "Yes, we do." He says, "It's unbelievable." He says, "We're from San Diego. We have never been to Prescott. We drove directly to this hotel." He said, "I'm a parapsychologist." So he asked me a few questions about Abby. And then he asked me if I had ever heard of channeling. Now, this is something that parapsychologists do. And they are able to channel in on the voice of a presence. He asked me if I had any paper, and I gave him a big pad of legal-size paper. He went up to his room, and he wasn't staying in room 16, he was in another room. And he came back down about an hour and 15 minutes later, and he had 7 pages all written out on questions that he had asked Abby, and she had answered them. And most of this information coincides with what we have learned from seances and the people with Ouija board. There was no way at all that this man could have known this information, because he had never even, before he came to Prescott, heard of this hotel at all. He came back down and he said, there certainly is one here. We did have a group several years ago from Embry-Riddle University that were very interested in Abby. And they got 3 parapsychologists and a Catholic priest here one night. They spent, the parapsychologist and the Catholic priest spent about an hour in room 16. They came on down to the lobby and said, yes, there definitely is a presence. I learned something that night. The parapsychologists have the ability to free a presence that's earthbound. So they asked if we wanted to have Abby freed. And Abby said nothing about it, so they came down and they asked us, and we said, leave it up to her. It's up to her whether she wants to stay. If she wants to stay, she's welcome. If she wants to go, it's fine. And for about 2 months after that, we didn't hear anything at all from Abby. But then she kicks up her heels. She doesn't do it all the time. We'll go through a period of 2 or 3 months and absolutely nothing will happen. And then she'll, for a week or so, she'll do little pranks on people. We have a lot of people that ask for it. It's a very popular room. We have a lot of people that want to stay in room 16. We have a lot of people that won't stay in room 16. We have a lot of people that drop into the hotel that want to hear about Abby, that want to see room 16. If room 16 is not occupied, we will let them go up to room 16. Now this is rather interesting because a lot of times it's a man and a woman, a couple, that'll come by. The men are the ones that feel the presence of something more so than the women do. We do have some women that feel the presence, but mainly it's the men who feel the presence. And sometimes you can go up to room 16 and there will be cold spots in the room. Something that happened a few years ago, we went through a year or so of this. Occasionally you would go into room 16 and you'd smell lavender. Now lavender was a scent that women used in the 20s. And there was a definite scent of lavender in the room. She goes on these tricks like the knocking at the doors. She'll do that maybe for 6 months to a year, and then she'll change over to some other different tactic. And to keep people interested, I think, is a reason for doing it. There have been many instances where people have been up in room 16 and all of a sudden they will see something on the bed, like somebody sitting on the bed. Not a person, just the impression on the bed of somebody sitting on it. And this is quite a common occurrence up there in the room. I guess Abby gets tired of roaming around the room, so she sits down for a while. Even ghosts, I guess, can get tired. I might mention this girl, Ginny, who worked here some years ago. Abby did not like her at all and used to play these tricks on her. She was the one who we played the trick with the footsteps upstairs. And she was standing at the bar here in the lobby one day, and she was talking to a guest. And the guest was asking her questions about the ghost. And Ginny had earrings on. And she was telling this woman about Abby, and suddenly she felt something pull at her ear, tug at her ear, and her earring fell off and fell on the floor behind the bar. but she says she definitely felt a tugging at her ear. And it was only a few days later that she was in the office and she was talking to the manager. And on the desk was an ashtray. Now, there were no cigarettes in the ashtray, and it was a heavy ashtray. And suddenly they were talking about Abby and about experiences, and suddenly the ashtray cracked in half. And it was a very heavy glass ashtray. So if Abby doesn't like you, you better watch out. To go back to this parapsychologist that channeled in on Abby, this is rather interesting. In one of her statements, she mentioned that she was going to be leaving soon. And he asked her about what she meant about leaving, and she says, for a new life. Now, this was some time ago, and Abby is still here. So soon to her, after all, she's been here since 1924. Soon to her, maybe 10 years from now, we don't know. But she did make that statement that she was going to be leaving soon. And he asked her, strangely enough, and I felt very flattered about this, he asked her about me. And she stated that I came to this hotel not of my own accord, that I was more or less enticed into coming here. Well, it's a very strange story, because before I moved to Prescott, and I moved to Prescott about 7 years ago, I used to come to Prescott and stay. I owned property here. And somebody suggested that I stay at the Hotel Vendome. And so I stayed at the Hotel Vendome. I stayed in room 16. Nothing happened to me at all. But Abby claims that I was enticed into coming here and that she feels something very strong with me. Now, she never plays any tricks on me anymore. We get along fine now. No problems whatsoever. And I think she decides that there's no use in playing a trick on me, because I'll just tell her to knock it off if she does.
Today, you can still request to stay in room 16, Abby's room at the Vendome. It's very popular to bring a cat toy for Noble and leave it in the room. For more information about the hotel and to book a stay there, visit vendomehotel.com.